Thank you, Derek. I would just say that I appreciate those kind words, and we do enjoy working with you. And y'all have a great staff here with Derek and his team that do a phenomenal job representing you at the Mississippi Capitol. I'm real proud of the team that we have at MDOT too. I know we've got at least one of our commissioners here, Commissioner John Caldwell. If it wasn't for the commissioners, I wouldn't have the opportunity to serve in the role that I have, so I appreciate he and Commissioner Simmons and Commissioner Busby for giving me this opportunity. What I've been asked to talk about this morning is primarily the politics of where we find ourselves. As it's been mentioned before, the last time that transportation for roads and bridges and highways has had a significant adjustment to the funding model was in 1987. To put that in perspective, I was 10 years old when that happened, and you can tell by looking at me that was a long time ago. And the costs have continued to go up, the revenue's been the same. So when you look at MDOT with our paving program, which is what we're held accountable for by the Federal Highway Administration, we have to keep a certain percentage of the highways, the bridges, and the interstates at certain levels of condition in order to continue getting our federal funds. So what we've seen is for the last several years, we've got the same amount of money going into our various paving programs, but the number of projects the Commission is able to award continue to go down. And so the condition of the collective system continues to get worse, which eventually will put us as a state agency at risk of losing our federal funds the same way that the local system experienced that threat a few years ago with the local bridges. So we've been working very hard to try to convince the legislative leadership that this is a core function of government, that everything else that they set priorities upon has to have an efficient, well-maintained transportation system in order to carry out their missions. In other words, it doesn't matter how much money we put in public education if the school buses can't cross our bridges. And it doesn't matter how good your health care is if the ambulance gets stuck in traffic on the way to the hospital. So we need this core function of government to be taken care of. And we need to do it not just because it's the right thing to do, but we also should do it just from a matter of self-preservation. If we were to ever lose the federal money or have the Federal Highway Administration tell us as a state, like they did with the local bridges not long ago, that you're falling too far behind in your performance targets, you as a state have to come up with some plan to generate the revenue necessary to start addressing this in a meaningful way. We're talking about 54% of MDOT's budget. That would shut down everything that we do statewide, and the effects of that would be catastrophic. So we're hoping that the legislature will not wait for a catastrophe or a crisis to try to address that. But again, 1987 was the last time that it was meaningfully adjusted until this year. This year, the House of Representatives introduced a bill, House Bill 1, that's primarily designed to eliminate the income tax. And while this was never said to me, this is Brad's just personal opinion, I believe that the leadership of the House of Representatives recognize that the only way that they can remove that type of revenue from the state budget is to make sure that they have something planned that's meant to take care of our infrastructure, to try to avoid a crisis down the road. And so a big component of House Bill 1 is generating about what they estimate to be about $400 million for the Department of Transportation, which would be a net increase, if you look through that, of about $280 million with other things that are in the bill. And also providing for state aid to the tune of what they would expect would be an additional $80 million. And this would be recurring revenue that would go year after year. So they're producing it in the way that we want it, recurring, dedicated. they're getting the amounts higher than they've ever gotten before. That really would go a long way of trying to eradicate the deficit that both state aid and MDOT runs. But like anything in the legislative process, this first stab, this first bill is not perfect. And there are ways to improve it. The way that they would generate this money currently is by applying another 5% sales tax on the consumption of fuel. And then also applying a 1.5 cent sales tax just generally in the unincorporated areas of the state, and that revenue generated would come back to state aid. The 5% on fuel would come to MDOT. And that's how they propose it. Now, there's a lot of other ways that they could try to do that differently, and there's a lot of opinions on that. We expect today that the Senate will come out with their plan. Again, it's going to be touted as a plan to address the income tax. But also, again, they're going to try to match the House in having components of their bill that is also to generate revenue for the Department of Transportation and for the counties with state aid, and I'm anxious to see what that is. I say all that to get to this point. When I worked for Senator Cochran a few years ago, he used to describe the art of legislating as kind of like climbing a mountain, people that like to climb mountains. He said sometimes the weather will not permit these individuals that do it as a sport to get to the top in different ways. So every year they set out to climb this mountain. They go as high as they possibly can, the time allotted for them to get there, what weather would allow, and they stake their flag with the intention of coming back the following year and trying again to go past that flag and stake another one. And so when we're looking at moving something through the legislature, we have to be very careful to make sure that we don't allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And we also have to make sure that we're keeping pressure and focus on the outcome that we need from them. If we get so bogged down in the details of a piece of legislation that we say, well, we don't like this, this ought to die, and they kill it, we may not have that opportunity to have the discussion about funding the next session. So that's a long way around the barn and me asking for your help. As Derek and the other speakers have said, there's strength in numbers. And we knew that if MDOT was at the Capitol and the commissioners and I were promoting our agenda, and if Harry Lee was there separately and he was talking about state aid, and the Supervisors Association was there and they were talking about the collective needs of the counties, and we were working in silos, that we wouldn't have an opportunity to be as successful as if we were working together and if we were working as one voice. And so we've set out to do that. And each of us have promoted all of various things that each of us need that may not impact us individually, but together will impact positively the overall transportation system of our state. So what I need from y'all is when you go to the Capitol today, or when legislative leaders are coming in, or when you talk to your local legislators, tell them we need funding for transportation. We've got to have it if we're going to be able to provide this core function of government in a meaningful way, and in a way that I would suggest your constituents and the taxpayers expect. Tell them that we need that, and work with them on improving whatever legislation we have alive in whatever way that would best benefit the counties or the state. And have the conversation, keep the conversation moving, so that ultimately by the end of the session, when the different negotiators from the House and the Senate are working together to try to come up with a final bill, that we still have been successful in keeping transportation in it, not just keeping it in it, but keeping it in it in a way that has generated the type of money we need, that's generated it how we need it to be generated in recurring fashion, and that ultimately will give the Commission and each of the boards of supervisors around the state the resources you need in order to adequately carry out the mission of providing this core function of government. I told the county engineers yesterday that I think a lot about when I graduated high school, and I was at my grandparents' house, and I see the Simpson County Board here, and my old friend Eric Bowen, county administrator, and I grew up with boys in the Jupiter community. And my granddaddy was a logger, and my grandmother stayed home. When I graduated high school, Mama was telling me, find out what would make you happy and do that. Money won't make you happy. So you find out something that you like to do and you'll never work a day in your life, but money won't make you happy. Do what makes you happy. Papa was reading the paper, and I didn't realize he was even listening. And when Mama left the room, he put the paper down and made sure she was out of earshot, and he said, your grandmother's right. Money won't make you happy, but the lack of it will damn sure make you miserable. So you better find something that will make you happy, but that will allow for you to pay the bills. And that's kind of where we all are. If we don't fix this funding model, I'm afraid we're going to be pretty miserable in a short time. But thank you for all you do. Thank you for your collaborative efforts, and thank you for allowing me to be with you this morning.